We're going to begin with Dr. Danny Davis in just a few moments. And then Mayuri Dika. Our 12 o'clock, we've had a change. So Alea Hagagal will not be presenting, unfortunately, but we will be showing a short film that will fit into that hour block before the lunch break. So just to let you know. Now, you can see the schedule if you go to FODC242.org, FODC242.org. Now, I also should be able to give you a Wi-Fi password. I'll get that for you from Addison in a moment. So I'm going to do the honors of introducing my good friend and colleague, Dr. Danny Davis. What can I say about him? I can say that I have never met anyone who gets more geeked about solving a problem than me, other than Danny Davis. He enjoys it, enjoys problem solving, and that's one of the things I think that have bonded us during our time. He is a chemist by profession and by training, who has had both private sector experience as well as has been a university professor for quite some time. He served as our registrar, I think it was for 10 years, and oversaw our transition to online registration. And he has most recently served as Associate Vice President for Institutional Strengthening and Accreditation. Did I get it right? Yes. And most noteworthy and most commendably, during our COVID-19 crisis, Dr. Davis left the boardroom and volunteered his services to the Ministry of Health at a crucial time in our country to help make sure that there was some logic and methodology and a system to how we were vaccinating. And I can tell you, because I can distinctly remember being in Grand Bahama and witnessing the vaccination process, or the attempted vaccination process, a day before Danny hit the island, and then the day Danny hit the island. Quite different experience. I certainly admire this gentleman and look forward to hearing his talk. And so without further ado, I invite our first speaker for today's session, Dr. Danny Davis, whose topic is The Bahamas Needs Another Pandemic. Dr. Danny Davis, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, all. Good morning. You should put this in presentation mode. Lovely. So, let's take on this title. Step one. I'm going to begin with UB. I'm going to begin with online courses at UB. Back in 2014, 2015, the College of the Bahamas was, as it always has been for quite a while, thinking about transitioning from being the college to being the university. And you would hear quotes saying that, even at the start of the institution, Prime Minister Pinland would have said, in 10 years you'd be a university or something to that effect. Well, it took us a little bit longer. We're here. I can back you up a little bit to 2014 and 2015. At that point, we were really serious about making this transition. And the way I knew we were serious is because we actually had money now. So we had a loan from a regional development bank, $16 million, that was going to help us transition. So we were going to do things like improve our financial accounting system. So we better track our money, get our audits on time. We're going to do some physical infrastructure improvements, get some more efficiency, LED lights, solar panels. We're going to do some serious things to make the University of Bahamas a distinct entity apart from what the College of Bahamas was. We were going to transition, and we were going to feel it. In addition to those things, we also, And these were two minor things, I thought at the time anyhow. One of the things we said was, hey, in being the University of the Bahamas, we have to really be sure that we're not the University of New Providence. So one of the things we should do is we should ensure that we have an online component. And that's why the loan had provisions in it for supporting the bringing in of consultants to train faculty on how to deliver online courses. Just like, hey, that makes sense. You know something? I could be in Miguana, Auckland, I could get on board, I could still educate myself, I can still improve myself from afar. Sounds good. The loan also had a provision for us to offer some courses and fund the offering of the first dozen, 2 dozen courses. So you get trained and then you put this thing into practice, and all that is supported through this initiative to transition to the university. Brilliant. I was on board. Actually, I was more than on board. I was coordinating this. I was the keeper of the money. So here we are. And I was saying to myself, oh, this is going to be exciting. Let me tell you something about the last provision on the board, this notion of delivering courses. It turns out that when you get money from these development banks, the recipient of the funds are unable to directly access the funds. So when faculty, let me rephrase that. At that time, we had 1 or 2 faculty who were really, doing online courses. It's only just a handful. But we couldn't use them to do the training because they were employed by the recipient of the loan. All right. I can take that one, no problem. Then I realized that when we offered the dozen or the 2 dozen courses, we couldn't use the money to support them through that either. The ones we just finished training, we still had to use external consultants. I was thinking, man, this sounds like a setup, but no problem. But it turned out that we had some other issues with the loan that was beyond these 2 here, but were minor in comparison. And ultimately, we canceled the loan. Yeah? Y'all could thank me later. I saved us $16 million, probably more than that. Yeah? We had to do it. It was in the best interest of the country at the time. We did it. But with that exercise plan, all these other things that we lost, you know what we lost? That transition to online courses. So we didn't get that injection to move us from where we were to having online courses and having that mechanism to be the institution for the Bahamas. So the online offerings, it fizzled out. We went back to business as usual. Until, guess what? Until COVID. Interesting thing happened with COVID. Everything locked down. So all of a sudden, this notion of coming into the physical structure to get instruction wasn't an opportunity and wasn't a possibility anymore. So we had to move to an online mechanism. At this point, a lot of the parts of the world were already affected by the COVID pandemic were already transitioning. So we said, hey, the thing to do is we could shut down and go home. We don't know at that point if we're going home for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. So we said, okay, we got to go online. We don't know if this can be, how long it's going to be. Let's be proactive. UB faculty, hats off to them. Because as Ian said, I was over at Ministry of Health at the time. UB faculty trained themselves. They got together. The people who knew how to do it taught the people who didn't know how to do it. They held hands. They had help groups. They delivered all the courses to an online modality within a few weeks, some within a few days. Miraculously. Yeah? Years prior, we couldn't get to that point. The COVID pandemic, for all the things that it did that was bad, forced the transition. The sad part is we needed something of that magnitude to make it happen, but the reality is that moved us from where we were to where we are today. Let me rephrase it, not where we are today, where we are 2 days ago. Because when the hurricane was coming, Tropical Storm Imelda, 2 emails and the whole university transitioned to online mode. No fooling around, no nothing, because we know how to do it. We have a skill set now that we can turn on and turn off as we need to respond to things like a tropical storm. We didn't lose any instructional time during that storm. We weren't physically on the campus, but the knowledge transfer occurred. And that was as a result of the experience we had through the COVID pandemic. No disrespect to any of the pain that pandemic caused. I just need you to appreciate my perspective on this. So, Now we're talking about the pandemic. Let's switch spaces across here to vaccine distribution. I need you to bear with me because I need you to engage me now with a step in this process. I want you to imagine what it would have been like if the COVID-19 pandemic only affected us. It was only the Bahamas. We were the only people who had cases. We were the only people shut down. The rest of the world was going on. You know what's going to happen? Our first stop was going to be to IHOC. Not IHOP, to IHOC. IHOP, you know, the International House of Pancakes, eh? ICOC, International House of Consultants. That's going to be our first stop if the pandemic only affected us. Because you know something, we don't really know about no mass outbreaks. We should get some help from somebody. So trust me, we're just going to have consultants in here from all over the world. It was only us. All right? They were going to be experts. They were going to be people who would have been exposed to Ebola outbreaks. They're going to be people who knew what to do in situations like this. So no one would really bat an eye. Let's bring in some people who know what they're doing. Yeah? Turns out, though, like I said, yeah, we wouldn't have bat an eye. We'd have been fine. Turns out, though, if you look at this picture of the International House of Consultants, there's some sign on the windows. Because in reality, the pandemic didn't only affect us. The pandemic affected the whole world. So, if you look closely, they were closed. So we couldn't go buy some consultants to get us through this. Shop was closed. So, you know what I always said in the plane? Put on your mask before you don for everybody else. Yeah. All those countries who had the resident experts, they were helping themselves. They were putting their mask on. They had no time for us. They were doing what they needed to do with the experts that they had because, like everybody else, they were faced with something. They didn't know what they were facing. People were responding and doing the best they could. We did the same thing. We believed in ourselves. We had much choice. Again, pressured by COVID, reality of COVID, we had to do something. We believed in ourselves. The team was assembled. Locals with the requisite skills. Not that any of these individuals had any experience in mass outbreaks to my knowledge, but collectively, the skill sets that we brought got the job done. We built the best vaccine distribution system the world has never seen. The unfortunate part about this is that knowledge that we gained from those 2 years of doing that, sit and follow. And I'm afraid because the childhood vaccine programs that have got us this far in the world is under attack, under threat. And if something were to happen, and we had something like a measles outbreak, our healthcare system, which on a good day is stress, is going to be stressed and potentially come to the breaking point again. Yeah? And like the nurse who's in charge of the childhood vaccine process in the Bahamas, I said to her one day during COVID, I said, how real is something like a measles outbreak for us? She said, at any given day, we are 40 minutes away from a measles outbreak. Because that's how long it takes for a plane to come from South Florida to the Bahamas. You interact with a couple of waiters, the customs guy at the airport, the immigration guy at the airport, they go home, gets into the school system, and before you know it, measles is rocking and rolling. Yeah? So it doesn't take long. And we don't have control over that for the most part. 7 million people coming to the country a year, or whatever the number is these days. So it's a real thing for us. So we had our vaccination distribution. And those of you who participated would have seen screens like this. Everything was fully electronic. We had a mobile app, did the trick. Yeah. In contrast, have a look at the picture at the top left. That's Sierra Leone. They had huge ledgers, paper ledgers, to record their COVID cases, results, etc. The picture down to the bottom is North Carolina in the US. They had these white cards that recorded their COVID results. In the Bahamas, we had a 100% digital record. We had a 100% digital appointment system. Everything was available online. We had an electronic vaccine certificate, no paper to carry around. Yeah? We had a QR code for security. We had OTP codes so that when you log in, you got the OTP code back. So everything was tight. We should be proud of what we did as a vaccine distribution mechanism. Yeah. Interestingly, though, in the literature, there's a paper from 3 U.S. healthcare professionals in the Journal of Public Health Management and Practice, touting the success of the pandemic vaccine distribution within the U.S. And I hope I just made a good case for you just now where we were rocking compared to them. Yeah? We haven't told that story. So if someone's reading the literature, this is the story they get. They don't know how good the Bahamas was. They don't know anything about it, right? I take sort of responsibility for that. So over the next couple of months, I'm going to try to correct this by having our story out there in the public forum that says this is what we did and this is how we did it and here's what we learned. So again, the comparison here. So we talked about state control in the U.S., whereas we had a national platform over here. I already told you the benefits and the attributes of the electronic components of it. And hopefully most of you had a chance to firsthand experience that. I think there's no comparison between the two. But my challenge here is that post-COVID, the childhood vaccine mechanisms are not benefiting from those lessons learned. We need another thing to get us into gear for that one. To start to depend on ourselves to say, hey, let's do this right. Let's do this now. Because it can be hard to close the gate on this when these cows leave if we have some other thing happen, right? So in essence, it seems as though we have this affinity for anything foreign. So let me ask you, and I'm going to imagine, I'm going to take a wild guess here that everybody in here, and if I'm wrong, don't correct me, everybody in here knows someone, that was a joke. Everybody in here knows some Bahamian professional who's abroad, in the US, Canada, or somewhere, who's doing well. They're making a career for themselves. They're making a name for themselves. They're making a contribution to wherever they are. They just that they're not here in the Bahamas, right? And I'm not talking about, I really want to think about those individuals who, there's a set of individuals who go away to school and don't come back. I really want you to think about those individuals who came back and couldn't find the fertile ground for them to prosper. And then they resigned and went back to from whence they came. Yeah? They're the people I want you to think about, right? We also seem to celebrate these individuals. And I'm taking nothing away from their success. I'm lamenting that we didn't provide a fertile ground for them to do the thing that they were equipped to do. Yeah? So I wanted a proxy for this on a national scale. I wondered, how do I quantify this? Because everybody's got this seat at the pants thing. I know my cousin, I know my neighbor, friend, sister, auntie, uncle. How do I quantify this? And I said to myself, you know what I can do? I can have a look at the COB UB commencement speakers. These are a quasi-model of success. We parade these people between the best that we have in the country, our graduates at the University of Bahamas. We say, hey, graduates, look at this person. They model them. They represent what we think success looks like. Or they have a good story to tell, whatever it is. And so from 77, which was the first graduation, to 2024, which is the last one, I looked at all of these speakers. So I asked myself, okay, recognition and validation of their success, where did that happen? So we said, okay, these people are away in that top box, speakers who are recognized as being successful through the validation of their accomplishments. You know something? They the head of NASA, they run in some company over in the US, they run in the bank in South Florida. Whatever it is they're doing, that's their thing. And they're doing it well somewhere else. So there are two things for this. They could be in the Bahamas or they could be doing this abroad, right? I want you to know the color of my boxes. That Bahamas box, that's my best attempt to get this. I don't look like I was too on, but hey, let me know. You see the one that's a little brighter green? That's because the grass is always green on the other side. All right, so keep those things in mind as I go to the other slides, because the other slides got some graphs in it. Okay? And I was thinking to myself, I took the democracy conference, I putting up some graphs. I wonder what the boss could think about this. But here we go. I can't help myself. He said I was a chemist. I have to put some graphs up. So here we are. We asked the question, where were our CLB and UB commencement speakers validated? Were they validated abroad or were they validated at home? When you look at this slide, you can see that 52% of them were validated abroad and 44% of them were validated in the Bahamas. And that's from 77 to now, New Providence. All right. I couldn't get a full set of data for Grand Bahama, and Grand Bahama wasn't a bigger set, so I had to leave them out. No problem. I think we're still going to get a reasonable picture here. In this set of numbers, these 52 or so speakers, we also have some politicians who were commencement speakers. Now, you can imagine that evaluating and choosing between a politician to be the speaker and John Doe over here, there's some biases in that selection. So I wanted to exclude the politicians because I didn't think that they represent the same scrutiny as everybody else who eventually became a speaker. So I took them out. When I take them out, here's what the chart looks like. We end up now with 64% of our speakers being validated abroad, and we have 31% of them validated in the Bahamas. So we now got this 2-to-1 ratio. So our graduates are twice as likely to see someone validated abroad than they are to see someone validated at home. Who's validated at home. I should make a note to you that that little null on the corner there, that's 2 individuals. I couldn't put them in a box. So basically, they sit in there, but I don't have them characterized properly, so they're just there. All right? And the 2 doesn't make a big enough difference in what we see in here in terms of the difference between these 2 numbers. So the challenge with this chart is we look at that, but I don't know whether or not this really happened as a result of those early years at the college or these latter years at university. Like, I know this picture, but I don't know if this really is the picture of today. So I pulled this one out. Same data, same data. The only thing I did was I blocked it into decades. The 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 20s, blah, blah, blah. So now I could see where my people come, yeah, and how many are in each one. The reason this chart is here now with no really color on it is because I need you to take notice of the height of each bar. I don't want you to pay attention to the colors, no color there. Stay with me. If you look at the height of these bars, in the 70s, which is the first bar, it's a short bar. Because we only had 3 graduation ceremonies in the 70s, 77, 78, 79. Then we switch over to the 80s, all right? We got 10 for the 80s. We have 10 for the 2000s because they're 10 years and they get 10 graduations. Note that the 1990s and the 2010s has 11 because in those decades we actually experimented and we had an extra graduation in the fall. So we had 11 instead of 10. I just wanted this graph to just bring that home for you. Now we need to add some color to this so we can see who's validated abroad and who's validated in Bahamas. So let's add some color to this and see what we see. Here's what we get. Once again, the aquamarine is Bahamian, the light green for the greener grasses abroad, and the brown is our politicians. Right? So, surprise, surprise, in the 70s, out of the 3 speakers, 2 of them were politicians. No big deal. We're starting out. People got a parade around. No big deal. The 80s, we dropped that down to 10%, with 60% of the speakers being validated abroad. It peaked in the 2010s, where we had 73% of our speakers validated abroad, and the 27% of them homegrown validation. What's interesting, but this is in the 2010s, we had no politicians for graduation speakers in that decade. I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah? In contrast to 1990s, the big brown bar there in the 3rd bar, you can see that we had over half of them, 55%, were politicians as commencement speakers in that particular decade. Yeah? Now I say to myself, last question I need to ask the state is, I know how they spread it over the years, so I can see that, you know something, in the latter years, we seem to be doing a little better in terms of getting more of the homegrown persons in there. And really, in fact, if you look at this, that aquamarine bar is really consistent. It's 30% of the speakers across the lifespan. When I say across the lifespan, you know, we got a 33, we got a 30, we have a 27, we have a 30. Basically, we've run about 30%. So a third of them has been that. But the question I wanted to know now is, okay, hold on. How many of these individuals were born in the Bahamas? So let's answer that question. So we can change this now so that the skinny line represents individuals who were born abroad. The fat lines that are along are the lines that represent speakers that were born in the Bahamas. So notice that all the politicians are the same width lines, the bigger lines, because of course politicians have to be Bahamians, so that makes sense. The aquamarine ones, basically the same, because these people who were born in the Bahamas, validated in the Bahamas, they're there. The light green line, though, if you look in the 1980s, that 60%, which is the skinny line, that's the same 60% we saw in the previous rendition of this chart. But now what it's saying to us is that everybody in the 1980s who were validated abroad were born abroad. In contrast, if you look at the 2010s, which is the penultimate bar, you'll see that 64% of them who were validated abroad were born in the Bahamas. Yeah? So, I will say one more thing about this data before I go for it. You can hold that question till then, don't worry about that. I got you. One other question I want to ask. I've answered most of my questions around the whole where they're from, where they got validated. I wanted to know now what we have in terms of alum. Like, how many of these individuals who are our speakers actually attended UB, attended COB? If you look at this chart, you see in the 70s and the 80s, the answer is 0. Surprise, surprise. We're just starting out. We don't have a time. Our graduates got to go there and do something in order to come back to get them in there. So it's no surprise to me that the answer is 0 for those first 2 decades. We get into the 1990s. By the way, it's the blue bar to the bottom that I'm looking at. In the 1990s, 9% of our speakers are alum of the university. 2000s, 10%, and 2010 is 27%. And in the 2020s, which is the last bar, is actually 40%. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's actually 40%. Even though the bar is shorter, the percentage of the overall bar represents 40%. So we're going in the right direction. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. Oh, one thing I'm supposed to tell you as well. I'm supposed to tell you that in this chart over here, I need you to pay attention to this bar. Pay attention to that bar that represents 64%. I want to talk about that in the next one. So we've established our alum, but here, I want to show you this again. Reason being, this 64%, we've rationalized our way through this. Very, very interesting. We've developed terms now. We said that, you know something, the navel string buried here. Never mind the fact that they've been to Europe for the last 25 years doing their thing. I don't hold that against them, but we sort of now say, okay, we can take them as our own. So the navel string buried here. This is a son of the soil. This is a daughter of the soil. Oh, they born and bred here, yeah? But we didn't provide them fertile ground to grow here. We live in a lie. Yeah? And we dressing it up, putting some lipstick on it, and calling it a good time. I think we have to do better. So, I feel that this sends the wrong message. Right? Keep in mind, I can repeat this. This is nothing against the individual who found themselves some fertile ground on which to grow. This is about the system that is not providing a fertile ground for the individuals who are here looking to grow. That's what this is about. That's the key to this. Right? So, is we effectively telling these students, you know, you have to lead, and this is implicit, it's not explicit, we're not saying this out loud. It's coming in by osmosis. You need the country to be successful. I like the idea that the number of alum are increasing. This affinity to foreign, that I started the section with, may have permeated the commencement seeker selection process. So hopefully this raises some awareness as to how we pick the next one, and time will tell. I'll update this in another couple of years and see how we do it. Yeah? So, last set of slides. In conclusion, I am not advocating or wishing for another pandemic scale event. That's the only line I read strictly off my slide to make sure it's right. Right? I'm not advocating that. I can see the headlines now. University professor calls for pandemic. Yeah. The question really is, why do we need a pandemic scale event to acknowledge our strengths within? The opportunity, that fertile ground is missing from our equation. We need to get that in there, all right? So the opportunity can not only be given when we have a pandemic scale event, We have to be able to recognize that we need to present these opportunities on a continuous basis. Yeah. So I'm not saying also that, you know, we don't have Bahamian consultants engaged. Yes, they got them out there. I'm saying this is not institutionalized. Yeah. So these recommendations, yeah, we stop our students from thinking that foreign is better. We need to convince our politicians and the public that homegrown is just as good or better. Yes, sir. Right? Let me give you my example of this. I looking at the clock here, I get some time on my clock, so I can stick an example that I didn't put in because I thought it was a little long on the time. Bananas. I grew up where we had a banana tree in the yard. And if you didn't have a banana tree, I can date myself a little bit. You could go on the Potter's Key Dock and you could buy some bananas. But we always had a banana tree, so you get some bananas. You always have too many bananas at any given time, so you share with your neighbors give them some money, get back, blah, blah, blah. Our bananas was only about this long. Most of the time, they were half green in color, but ripe and sweet as could be. We have been convinced that bananas must be yay long. They must have this curve exactly like this, and they must have a label that says Chiquito. We have been convinced. I think we need to be more deliberate about what we do and how we do, because these things infiltrate. And it's hard to deprogram some of these steps. You get somebody under 15, they don't know what a banana look like from the tree. Because they're looking at that in the store and saying, mommy, not that one. But that's sweeter than the Chiquita would get picked last year in Mexico. So, I digress. So yes, I think to some extent, we're still giving into the colonial past with this affinity for foreign. Yeah. So we don't really need another crisis. We just need to learn from the crises that we had. We should try that and apply those learnings. I feel like with regard to the vaccine distribution, those learnings are sitting fallow. So last picture, under construction is the Bahamas House of Consultants. You need one of these, right? So that I thank you. Oh no, before I thank you, I should also say to you, disclaimer, I got two AI things in this presentation. The two photos. This photo here and the photo of the International House of Consultants. All right? I ain't sure I'm being real. I can thank my wife for generating those. So yeah, it's amazing what I think can do. But nonetheless, we need a Bahamian House of Consultants. And this picture is under construction. And I definitely thank you, the organizers, for allowing me this half hour to come here and share my thoughts with you on this subject. And thank you for indulging me in listening. So, thank you.
So, well, you know what happens next. We open the floor for questions. And
The young lady over there is chopping at the bit.
I'm Jasmine. I'm with the Organization for Responsible Governance, but I was trained in public health, so I had a few questions, especially regarding the vaccine distribution. I was wondering, I was at home for part of it, but I was in the U.S. and then I got sent home from college, and I was just wondering, did you think that, I recall there being a delay in the Bahamas getting vaccines, at least because, you know, the U.S. was rolling out like Pfizer, all that stuff, much, I think, sooner than we got them at home. So I was wondering if you think that the delay in vaccines here allowed for a better response for you to be able to, we just had people in home for longer before we rolled out our vaccine response, so do you think that played a role in choosing a digital response?
No, I don't think it actually played a role in that because we were ready. We were waiting for vaccines is what our challenge was. Like, you know, it's interesting, you know, post-World War II, the UN is supposed to try to equalize the world in these events. No, the countries with the money get the vaccines, you know. So I think our population got to see on TV vaccine distribution in other jurisdictions, and maybe that made it easier or harder, I don't know. But the fact that there was that delay, no, that's just a function of the fact that we're a small country and we have to scrabble for what drops on the table.
And then my second question, Do you think that, obviously, I mean, our population size played a role in vaccine distribution, and do you think the Bahamas benefited from our size? And then in other ways, do you think there was like negative impacts, such as like our amount of hospitals?
Definitely, the number of hospitals played a role. I mean, every family islander who was who was really suffering from the COVID thing had to get airlifted into Nassau. So I think definitely if we had better infrastructure, that would help. In terms of the number of the size of the population, the only thing that would have changed is if we had twice the population size, we would have had twice the number of centers to distribute to. Because I don't know if you noticed that we tried to make sure that they were across the island in New Providence. Even in Grand Bahama, we were in across the island. So the software was scalable to whatever we needed it to be. It's just the physical location. So I think if you were twice the size, you'd have had the same experience and just more opportunities. Because the idea of having multiple locations, so you don't have this crowding of individuals at a given point. Yeah. And now that you've asked that question, I can tell you something else about the distribution system. The biggest impediment we had during the vaccine distribution was getting the public to trust that they should come during their appointment time. Because what would happen is you would log into the system, get an appointment for 9 o'clock. It's like, yeah, I trust these stewards. I go down there for 7. So you get at 7, you complain that the place ain't open. Because you're on the line, you have nothing to do, so you pick up your phone. They ain't open yet. It's 7 o'clock. So what we ended up doing was and we saw this in Grand Bahama, we had, as people came in, we said to them, when is your appointment time? And they said 9 o'clock. We put them in the 9 o'clock huddle. 10 o'clock, we put them in the 10 o'clock huddle. The word got out, and every time the newspaper interviewed me or the TV or whatever, I said to the public, come at your appointment time. Don't come early. All you're making yourself wait longer. And we would bring the 10 o'clock group in at 9:45, process them. Bring the 11 o'clock in, process them. Bring the 10 o'clock in, process them. And eventually people got the idea, something you don't have to rush because those guys got it together. It was organized. So it worked out in that sense. I don't think having a larger population would have impeded the rollout.
And then final question. I was asking about what you're referring to is basically like brain drain, that, people go abroad and they never come back, and then there's a lack of, skilled Bahamians that could be in these roles. So I was just wondering, what do you think maybe the role of UB is in addressing brain drain?
Come on, I'm ahead of
I think UB's role in that is to start off with by making sure we have good examples for our graduates to follow. As I've shown you, I think that's definitely the thing. But the thing about UB is our job is to produce seeds. We produce the best seeds we could, and we send them out there to be fertile. The country as a whole has to provide some fertile soil for them to go in. Because no matter how much we equip them, if they land on the rock, they are not going to germinate. And these seeds could get up and walk when they realize nothing below them. So I think it's more than just UB. We have to see this as a collective thing as to how we build a country. There's multiple areas where this could be better. Now, one of the ways UB could probably directly affect it is as we become more of the consultants for the government, our students get exposed to these sort of things so they know what it is they're getting into, and they become better equipped to serve in these roles because they would have had experience at this point. At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, I didn't have any experience in vaccine response, vaccine distribution. I had data analysis, I had these other skills that was applied to that particular problem. You walk into a problem with a toolbox, you use that to fix the problem. And you have to be careful that in your toolbox, you're equipped to do this, because if the only thing you have in your toolbox is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Yeah? So once you equip with a proper toolbox, you can address some of these issues. Right? I think I have a question in the corner over there, then we'll come back to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Dr. Davis. Very interesting topic. I'm sure you're aware of that. Dr. Camille Smith, I'm a counselor here. I wonder if you could go back to the slide with regard to the whether the commencement speakers were actually alumni I'd like to see that. And I wonder if you could perhaps attach that more to the topic. Because I was wondering if you were somehow indicating that the pandemic level meant that we were actually choosing our own alumni more or not. And that wasn't clear to me, so I just wanted to ask you to go back to that, if you could talk a little more on that, please.
Okay. Good,
Thank
good,
you.
Good question. No, I was not trying to make that point at all. This slide here is my desperate attempt not to only have bashing of the selection process. I needed something positive to go along with all the negative things I was saying. This is my positive slide. It's plain and simple, nothing to it. I'm not saying that as a result of COVID we went with more, went less. No, I'm not. All right. Sorry. There was okay. Anyway, something, you control the question. I can answer them as they come. My best. Yeah. You're welcome.
Good morning, Dr. Davis. Thank you so much for having us here and for kicking us off in such a provocative way. I'm interested in the way and the angle that you took that, and I had I think the honor of serving also during the pandemic and during hurricanes, and this dynamic you talk about, best of class systems being developed and then being left to the side or never being carrying over is consistent with what happened in Joaquin, what happened in Dorian, what happened in COVID. And part of that dynamic is, I think, also related to the politicizing of these efforts. So what I think is really interesting in the slide where you look at is how consistently you see an emphasis on honoring and putting forward our politicians as the UB commencement speakers. And I'm wondering if there's any comparison to either regional universities or average universities as to, is that proportion higher here or not? Because the value that we put on that as the pinnacle in some ways reduces the consistency of carrying over these ideas that can be started by one group or one cadre of consultants or local experts and then waited, put down for another 5 years to be brought forward. So your thoughts on that would be great.
Interesting. I do believe that yes, I'm processing still. Not only am I processing, I also lose my train of thought. Time to get some hair dye. Give him the mic again, please, Ian. Yeah. Like, my mind got ahead of itself just now, and I lost it.
This is the dialogue, right? So wherever it takes us, let's go. It's a small group, so let's use that.
Yeah, give me the one.
My point being, one, that I have the premise that these things that have happened in various disasters or to your point, that's what raises our game, is as a disaster causes us to put forward our potential and solutions happen that are, in your instance, best of class.
Yes.
Politicization, what effect does that have on it? And to the point that you show that slide, what made me think that was looking at how the emphasis on politicians as recipients of the commencement speaker, what does that reinforce with us, and do you think that has a bearing on what we're talking about?
I think it has a bearing on what we're talking about for sure. I do. How do I can say this to you? When you think of politicians, these are the people who were successful in getting elected. They're not necessarily the best, in education or the best in finance or the best in that. So our politicians also need to be able to use the resources that surround them. And part of that resources go beyond their office. I'm trying to make that point as well. So putting them up on the stage, to me, we should use that platform for some other behemoth to model that activity. I think our students see our politicians sufficiently. I don't know that this platform here is where we should be we could use that platform better. Nothing against the politician in this instance, but we could actually elevate this notion that the strength can come from within, and you don't have to be a politician to succeed. Yeah?
So I want to ask a question, and then I'll.
You
I
still got a
remember-
gentleman on the far side, by the way.
Ken, you still? Okay, okay.
Sorry, I was calling.
Yeah.
Alright.
So what I wanted to get at was there was pressure that we were under, and there was no one coming to the rescue. Is essentially what you're saying, and we had to do it ourselves. I remember when there was an instructional video from Hopkins that we were supposed to use, and I seem to remember that you hated it. You really hated it, and you created your own.
Yes.
So, like but you were able to. In other words, you had a license to make sure that whatever you did was adapted and relevant and culturally sensitive to our situation. You weren't being forced to impose something that didn't speak our language, you know what I'm saying? You weren't forced to impose that on us. You had a license to create, modify, use what you could, but create something that was for us.
Yes.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we truly ask the question, how do we create this space where we give ourselves permission to be the experts? Outside of that, something that could kill all of us, yeah.
I think one of our first steps we should do is abandon the expression best practices. The first phrase we should abandon. I went to school in Nova Scotia. It snowed seemed like forever. I loved it, I'm not complaining. In Nova Scotia, in the wintertime, you know what they do? They spread salt across all the parking lots. That's their best practice. Why would we in the Bahamas think that, something, we should do that? We should spread some salt across there. This notion of best practice restricts us. We put ourselves into a box by trying to adopt something from external. Adopt is the key word there. I'm saying we should adapt these things, all right? So, Ian alluded to this notion of the John Hopkins. So I stopped my timer, but I think I still get time. John Hopkins, during the pandemic, produced a training video on how to do contact tracing. Because basically you need more people on Ministry of Health on a normal day doesn't have enough people to do contact tracing during a pandemic. So we needed more hands on deck. So rather than trying to do a training session where I talked to two people, hey, we did the online thing. So I wrote to John Hopkins and I said to him, hey, I like your training thing. Can I adapt this to the context of Damien? Because I don't want to have a training thing that talks about when you go on the train, don't touch the rail because we don't have any trains. Yeah? So they said, yeah, go for it. Knock yourself out. And I recruited people who knew about making films. Dr. Strong is one of them. Go do this, because I don't know anything about making films, but I do know I needed a training that matched this. So I got another English major to change the language to suit the Bahamas, take out the train and put in the jitney and whatever, do all those things. You talk about the creative license. We had them. I think I should really give props here to Dr. Dalregis, Nursing Dalregis. She was like, do it. There was no hesitation. We need to be able to respond to this. We need a training program. If you can do it, don't tell me how. Let me know when it's done so we can roll it out. And that's how we were successful. We had some missteps along the way, but ultimately we had the latitude to fail. And you need that. If you're so conservative that you can't go there and make an effort to do something, you basically paralyze yourself. So the two things I'm saying out there is don't be afraid to fail and abandon the thought of adopting best practices. We took that training module from John Hopkins and we made it with Bahamians. We made the whole video, every module, and we put it online, and that's how we trained our contact tracers during the pandemic. There's another story we need to tell.
Yeah, great presentation, Andy.
Thanks,
So your presentation is about a couple of things. One main thing is the idea that capacity is necessity driven sometimes. It shouldn't always be that way, I agree. But you also dropped in a little perspective that I think you kind of have skipped over in terms of answering this gentleman's question. And that is the point that capacity building driven by necessity, and then the capacity lies fallow. It's lost. And I think the gentleman was asking about how does the political process undermine capacity building? And I want you to, I'm not gonna let you get off that.
I'll endorse that.
Yeah.
So I looked over here to see whether or not that.
This is
Yeah.
the future democracy conference. Jump in the pool.
The political process definitely impedes that capacity building, without a doubt, in my process, in my thought. I think for the most part, we run in these 5-year cycles, Michael, and we can't build a country over a 5-year cycle of these intervals where one project is started, and then the government changes, so that project sits and then go again. I thought the National Development Plan was going to be an effort to try to see if we could take the edge off some of that. But I don't think that happened. And someone else in the room here may be better equipped to comment on that than I am. But I don't feel it anyhow. Yeah? So definitely the politicians are not helping this cause. It's the short answer for that. Yeah? And sorry, I mean, obviously the tag team may have worked this time. But yeah, that's my answer to that, for sure.
And
Yeah.
it is for us to figure out what are the political mechanisms that are actually counterproductive, that are actually driving our capacity down. I think we have to work it out.
Is
The details.
Is it also a case that we govern by outing fires? We don't necessarily think about, I mean, we build buildings all the time. We have a ribbon cutting, etc. But we don't factor in the maintenance of said building. Yeah? So these are things that I think has to get. Politicians are not greater on the number of buildings they maintain. They're greater on the number of buildings that they build. Yeah? You never see anybody doing a campaign shouting about how we repainted the building. It's like, yeah, you repainted the building, buddy. I think we also, the population need to also think about this. People get excited. I always seem to be cutting my hedge during the campaign periods. And they would come around and I'd be clipping my hedge. Clipping my hedge is therapy for me, all right? So I do that. And party come around and hey, blah, 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 blah. And they were telling me how they were proudly proclaiming, let me rephrase that, how the candidate successfully got the old lady up the street her old age pension payments, whatever it's called. I said, buddy, you gotta be joking. I want a system where every old lady can get her pension money without any input from Minister A or Minister B. It should be a system in place. I think we need to raise the bar for the standards for what we take from these people. And I don't think we've gotten to the point, both of you, where we're saying to politicians, we need to see continuity in some of these foundational things. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still applauding the new building. Yeah?
Question of you.
Yes, sir.
With the danger of self-promoting, I'm giving the talk in the morning, 10 o'clock, on AI and governance. Because so much of what you said throughout is, I can see the problem as we don't have data. We don't use data. In the data age, we simply believe, oh, put your finger to the wind and we'll see what happens. Whereas data is available, unfortunately we don't have what we should have, but we need to switch. Okay, it's not a matter of how I feel and who I like, it's where does the data point? We have to make data-based decisions. We're not gonna maintain something if we don't track its decline.
Yes.
And we're not going to have people come from the diaspora, if we don't track their skills,
Yes.
if we don't let them know what we need for them to study or to investigate in order to come back and make a contribution. So we need data.
I agree.
10 o'clock tomorrow.
We'll be there.
You know, I just wanted to make a comment that the young lady asked about how university could address the brain drain. What's interesting is, as an institution like ours, we as professors, we know who the bright students are and the people who have the potential to become academics and researchers and so on. But there's no mechanism that where the university is intentionally identifying the talent at the undergraduate level, supporting them at the graduate level with the expectation or requirement that they return and that they know they will have a job when they do. That's the most important part, because you ask a young person to go and make a serious investment of 5 to 7 years to get a terminal degree. There's only one university to come back to, whereas there are 1,000 or more in North America. It's a no-brainer what they're going to do. They're going to choose the more, where the probability is greater for them,
Yes.
which would be abroad. So, but we have it within we have the ability, if we want to set ourselves up for the next 20 years by identifying that talent and investing in them as an institution, so that we also can make sure we have the kind of complement and expertise that we want to have that will help support national development and help the university be excellent in the future. But instead, we just leave it. We say, you're smart, you should go to grad school. Good luck. And then maybe we never hear from them again.
Yeah. Agreed.
We can take one more question, anybody, or comment. Doesn't have to be a question. Otherwise, yes.
Hi again. So, as a counselor, when I think of brain drain, I acknowledge totally that is very correct, that we need to have opportunities for people to come back to. But I also want to raise the point, as a counselor, that we're not the kindest people in our country. We have a lot of attitudes that make people sometimes not feel welcome, particularly people of differences. Even women may not feel welcome coming back. So again, I say, yes, this is far off from your topic, but I want to at least say it, and I want to have it acknowledged that we have difficulty in this country with how we treat people. We're not the most compassionate people. I'm Bahamian, in case anybody is wondering if I'm bashing somebody else. We're not the most compassionate people. As a counselor, I work with a lot of people who, just from even high school bullying, from being treated as different because they are othered, even in the university environment, even in the country as a whole. So while we address the jobs, Dr. Strong and Dr. Davis, we also have to address the attitudes. We have to understand that diversity is present, and we need to be able to be compassionate with people who have differences. And we're not. And I'm talking about a number of different types of differences. I'm told even with people who have physical disabilities, they feel as if they are not accepted, they are not respected, they are not treated appropriately in our own country. So that is something we also have to be concerned about. Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity.
Thank you. So, Dr. Davis,
I'm off the hook now.
we want to thank you for your presentation and thank you for your thoughtful responses. Ladies and gentlemen, please give Dr. Davis a hand. I think you got us off to a very good start.